There is a 911 call in our system that came from a place with no address. No parcel number. No structure. No road that touches it. The dispatch map shows nothing but a green field and a drainage easement, the way the map shows any patch of county land that nobody has ever needed to find. But the audio is real. The caller is calm. He speaks like a man who has called us before and expects to call again. And the disposition note says I reviewed that call, cleared it, and signed it with my own initials 4 months before I ever heard it. I've checked. More than once. The initials are mine. The employee ID is mine. The review timestamp is from a Tuesday night I spent at home, with the porch light on and my phone face down on the counter. I was not in that building. I have the schedule to prove it. The schedule does not matter to the record. Let me explain what I do, because none of this lands right without the procedure. The procedure is the whole point. Without it, this is just a man telling you he heard something strange. With it, it's a problem that has a number, and a location field, and a name attached. Mine. I'm a quality review analyst for a county emergency communications center. 19 years in this building. The first 11 on the floor, taking calls and working a radio, the way most of us start. The last 8 in a small office off the back hallway, reviewing the work of the people still out there doing it. That means I listen to recordings. I read incident cards. I check call taker notes against dispatcher timestamps. I audit response times, the interval between when a call connects and when a unit actually rolls, because that interval is the number that ends up in lawsuits. I compare the location a caller gives out loud against the location the phone system pulled automatically. I look for the gaps where a call went wrong, or almost did, and I write it up in language careful enough that it can sit in a file for years without causing anyone a problem. That last part is most of the job, honestly. People assume quality review is about catching mistakes. It isn't, not mostly. It's about documenting them in a way that doesn't create what my supervisors call exposure. A dispatcher who keys the wrong unit, a call taker who forgets to attempt a callback on an abandoned line, a 4-minute delay that should have been 90 seconds. Those things happen on every shift. My job is to record them truthfully and bloodlessly, so that the truth exists in the file without becoming a weapon in someone's hand. You learn to write like that. You learn that the difference between dispatcher error and procedural deviation is the difference between a man losing his job and a man getting a memo. You learn to never write a sentence that a lawyer could read aloud to a jury and make sound like cruelty. You learn which words close a file and which words open a wound. I'm telling you this so you understand that I am not a dramatic person. I am the opposite of a dramatic person. I am paid to be the opposite. People think 911 is one clean system. It isn't. It's a stack of systems that barely tolerate each other, layered up over 30 years, each one bolted onto the last. There's the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch, where every incident lives as a card with a number. There's the phone side that pulls ANI and ALI, the automatic number identification and the automatic location identification, the data the carrier hands us when a call connects. There's the wireless piece, phase 2, where a cell call is supposed to deliver actual coordinates from the handset instead of just throwing you the address of a tower 3 miles away. There's the GIS map, the geographic layer that turns a set of coordinates into a pin on a screen, and turns a pin into a street address a dispatcher can read aloud. There's the radio system that logs every unit, every status change, every timestamp. And there's the audio archive, where every second of every call is recorded and held, by law, for years. When all of those agree, the job is simple. The card matches the map matches the audio matches the radio. You read it, you confirm the response time, you close it. When they disagree, that's my cue. The disagreements are the work. Most of them are boring. I want to give you a few, because I need you to understand how ordinary my days are, so you'll understand why this one wasn't. A man calls from his cell to report a crash. The Phase 2 location drops him on the eastbound side of the interstate. He's actually on a frontage road a quarter-mile south, because the tower that took the call faces the highway and the system guessed. The dispatcher hears the right cross street, corrects it by hand, units roll to the right place. In review, I note a wireless location discrepancy, carrier side, no dispatcher error. 2 minutes of my life. Closed. A woman calls from a house that doesn't exist on the map. New subdivision, 40 homes, went up the previous summer. The address validation table hadn't ingested the new plat yet, so when she gives her address the system rejects it as invalid. The call taker, who's a good one, just types the coordinates and tells the unit to look for the new construction off the county road. In review, I flag the validation table for an update and send a note to the GIS team. Mundane. The kind of gap that exists in every growing county. An older caller reports a fire and gives a landmark instead of an address. By the old grain elevator. There hasn't been a grain elevator there in 15 years, but the dispatcher grew up in this county and knows exactly where the old grain elevator was, and the truck gets there. In review, I note that location was established by landmark, dispatcher local knowledge, no delay. I've written that note 100 times. People describe the county they remember, not the county the map records. That's normal. That's human. I'm telling you all of this so you understand that when a caller references something that isn't on the current map, my first instinct is not wonder. My first instinct is the address validation table, the carrier feed, the local memory of an old man. The boring explanation is right about 95 times out of 100, and the careful analyst is the one who reaches for it first, every single time, on reflex, before anything else. I reached for it this time too. I want that on the record. I reached for every boring explanation I had, in order, the way I always do. The call I'm telling you about came to me through the normal review queue, on a normal overnight shift, under the normal flicker of those long ceiling lights that never quite turn all the way off. I work nights for the quality side because the floor is quieter and I can actually hear the recordings without somebody's live call bleeding through the wall. I had the bad machine coffee, the kind that tastes more like the pot than the beans. I had maybe 40 incidents stacked in the queue, most of them flagged for response time review, the usual overnight backlog. And one of them had no address. The incident card was complete in every other way. CAD number assigned, valid, in sequence. Call taker position logged. A disposition code attached, the code we use for a handled, closed incident where the situation resolved on scene. Units shown as dispatched and cleared, with times. A QA review already attached, marked complete. But the location field, where there should have been a street number and a road name, just held a set of coordinates and the phrase pending validation. That alone isn't alarming. Coordinates without a clean address happen all the time, especially on wireless. What stopped me was that the card was closed. Reviewed. Cleared. You do not close a QA review on an incident that never got a validated location. The location is the thing the review checks. Closing a review on an unvalidated location is like signing off on an audit of a number you never looked at. It's the one thing the process exists to prevent. So I opened it to see which of my colleagues had been sloppy enough to clear a card with a hole in the middle of it. The QA reviewer initials were mine. I read them 3 times. Then I checked the reviewer ID against my own badge number, the one I typed 40 times a shift. Same number. Same initials. The review date was a Tuesday in the fall, months back. My first thought was relief, almost. Cloned card. The CAD does that sometimes, copies a template forward and carries the old reviewer string with it, the way a photocopy carries a smudge. I'd seen ghost data survive a system migration before, leftover fields that mean nothing, fossils from an older version of the software. A reviewer attribution that just got dragged along for the ride. So I went looking for the original, expecting to find that I'd reviewed some real incident, somewhere else, and this was only an echo of it wearing my name. There was no original. This was the only card with that number. And the number was valid, sequential, healthy. It sat in the log right between two real incidents from that night, a medical call on the north side and a minor traffic complaint downtown, both of which I could pull up, both of which had clean addresses and clean audio and made perfect, forgettable sense. This one sat between them like a tooth that didn't belong in the jaw. The right size. The right place in the row. Wrong tooth. I pulled the coordinates and dropped them into the GIS terminal. The pin landed on empty land. County mapping showed a long rectangle of undeveloped ground on the far edge of the response district, out past where the subdivisions stop and the county stops pretending to grow. No structure. No driveway. The nearest road was almost a quarter-mile off, and between that road and the pin there was a drainage easement and what the layer labeled as low ground, the kind of place that floods every spring and grows nothing but cattails. I checked the parcel layer, the one that shows ownership. The pin didn't fall inside any registered parcel at all. It landed in a gap, one of those slivers that exist between recorded properties because some surveyor's work in 1950 didn't quite close, a few feet of nobody's land that no tax bill has ever been sent to. No address. No parcel. No structure. No road access. And when I checked the incident history for that location, no prior calls. Nothing had ever been dispatched there. Not a fire, not a medical, not a welfare check, not so much as a false alarm. Empty land doesn't generate emergencies. That's the one thing empty land is reliable about. So now I had a closed, reviewed 911 incident from a place that, as far as every record in the building was concerned, did not exist. And my name was on the close. I told myself, bad coordinate packet. It happens. A wireless call comes in, the phase 2 data is corrupted somewhere between the handset and the carrier and us, and the system drops a pin on a meaningless point. The dispatcher would have stayed on the line, pulled a real address out of the caller verbally, and sent units to the right place. The garbage coordinate is just a scar left over from the phone network, frozen on the card. That's a clean explanation. It accounts for the empty land. It accounts for the pending validation. I liked it. I wanted it. So I went to listen to the call, fully expecting to hear a dispatcher patiently dragging a real address out of a real person who was, in fact, somewhere else entirely. The audio archive is its own system, walled off from the CAD, and you reach a recording by its incident number and timestamp. I entered the number. The file was there. Length, a little over 6 minutes. I put my headphones on, turned off the overhead light so the screen was the only thing in the room, and played it. It opened the way they all open. The call taker's voice, flat and trained, the cadence we drill until it stops sounding like a question. 911, what's the address of your emergency? And the caller answered. A man. Older, I thought. Tired in a specific way I recognized, because I've heard 10,000 frightened people and a much smaller number of people who have stopped being frightened and gone quiet underneath it. He wasn't panicking. There was no breathlessness, no edge. He sounded like a man making a call he'd made before, going through a script he was sick of. He didn't give a street address. He said, "You have the location. You've been here." The call taker, doing her job exactly right, asked again. "Sir, I need an address or a cross street." And he said, "It's the same place." They missed the turn again. "Tell them it's past where the road used to go." I stopped the playback. "Past where the road used to go." I want to be precise about why that line bothered me, because on its own it isn't dramatic. People say imprecise things to 911 constantly. By the gas station that closed. Near the old mill. Behind where the bowling alley used to be. Callers narrate their county from memory, and memory keeps things the map has already let go of. But used to go is a specific claim. It doesn't say there's no road. It says there was one. It says the man knows the road is gone and is orienting by its absence. And the current GIS showed me no road there at all, present or past. So I did what I do for any caller who references something that isn't on the live map. I went into the historical layers. County GIS keeps old layers stacked underneath the current one, the way you'd keep sheets of tracing paper. Subdivision plats from decades back. Retired road names. Easements that got vacated when a project went through. Most people never turn those layers on. There's no reason to, day to day. I turned them on, one at a time, oldest to newest. And there was a road. An old county road, present only in the historical layer, running straight out toward that low ground and ending in a small hook right at my pin. The current layer didn't have it because it had been vacated, officially abandoned, decades earlier, almost certainly when the drainage project went in and the county decided the road wasn't worth maintaining over ground that flooded every year. The road used to go there. It doesn't anymore. There's no surface, no maintenance schedule, no address range assigned to it. As far as the modern county is concerned, it was never there at all. The caller had described, correctly, a road that existed only in a buried layer of the mapping system. A layer I'd had to deliberately switch on to find. He knew about the hook in the road, the turn, the thing that washes out. He knew the county the way the historical layer knew it, and the historical layer is not something a confused caller stumbles into. I sat with that for a while in the dark of the office. The screen glow, the hum of the building, the queue still sitting there with 39 ordinary incidents in it. Then I played the rest of the call. He stayed calm the whole way through. That's the part one keep returning to. The call taker kept asking the standard questions, the ones we're required to ask, and he kept answering as if he'd answered them many times and didn't begrudge her for asking again. There was an awful patience in it. She asked what the nature of the emergency was. He said, the same as last time. She asked if anyone was hurt. He said, no one's hurt yet. They just never make it down the turn. She asked if he could get to a safer location. He said, I'm where I always am. You know where I am. And then he said the thing that made me take off my headphones and check the room behind me, which I had not done in years. He said a unit number. A real one. One of our county sheriff units, by its actual call sign, a number I could have matched to a roster. He said, tell 42 it's the second approach, not the first. The first one washes out. Call takers don't give callers our unit numbers. Callers aren't supposed to know them. There's no public reason a man on the line would know which car was coming, let alone which approach it should take to a road that doesn't exist. And he didn't say it like he was repeating something he'd overheard. He said it the way you'd remind a friend which exit to take, knowing they always miss it. Then, underneath his voice, very faint, there was radio traffic. Not street noise. Not a television in another room. Not the wind. The specific scratch and clipped cadence of a county radio channel, the flat compressed sound of our own dispatch radio, the sound I have had in my ears for 19 years. It was bleeding into a 911 call placed by a man standing on land with no road, no structure, and no address. I checked the obvious thing first, because that's the discipline. Sometimes a call taker's own radio bleeds into a call if the headset and the console are positioned wrong, and you hear our side of the floor behind the caller. But the card noted the call came in on a standard line, and the bleed pattern wasn't right for that. Our radio behind the call taker sits at a certain level, in a certain place in the stereo field. This wasn't behind her. It was behind him. It was in his world, not ours. The call ended the way the system logs an ordinary close. The disposition code was the one we use for a handled call where the situation resolved on scene, no transport, no further action. Units cleared. Clean. The kind of close I sign off on 20 times a night without a second thought. And the QA review, my review, the one I never performed, was attached at the bottom with a single line of standard language. Reviewed, location pending validation, no response time exception noted. My initials. My ID. The date months in the past, on a night I was home. I did the thing I'm trained to do when I find something I can't explain. I documented it factually, and I escalated it in writing, in the most neutral words I owned. I wrote that a closed incident in the QA queue carried a reviewer attribution under my credentials for a date on which I was not scheduled to work. I wrote that the location field failed validation against both the parcel layer and the address database. I wrote that the attached audio referenced district-specific operational details inconsistent with an unvalidated wireless location, and requested a system integrity check on the reviewer attribution and the position log. I did not write that a man had described a vacated road that exists only in a buried map layer. I did not write that I heard our own dispatch radio behind a caller standing in a floodplain. I'd been in this building long enough to know that the analyst who writes those sentences is the analyst whose own judgment becomes the next thing under review. You write the supernatural into an official record once, and the record stops being about the call. It becomes about you. The response came the next afternoon, from my supervisor. Her name is Diane. She's run the quality side a long time, and she's good at it in the way that people who survive in county government are good at things, which is that she never says one word more than the situation forces out of her. She came to my office instead of replying in writing. That was the first thing I noticed, and it told me more than anything she said. We do everything in writing. Coming in person meant she didn't want a thread. She had a printout in her hand, folded once, and she didn't sit down. She said, "This is a GIS error." I said the location was only part of it. She said, "It's an address validation issue. The coordinate didn't resolve to a serviceable address. That's all this is." I told her the review was attached under my ID on a night I wasn't working, and that I'd checked the schedule. She looked at the printout, not at me, and she said, "Then it's a credential carryover from the template. The system stamps the last reviewer string forward. You know it does that." I said it doesn't happen on an incident with no original to carry from. There's no parent card. This is the only one with that number. And she went quiet for a moment, the way people go quiet when they're choosing the sentence that costs the least. Then she said, "Mark it as a non-serviceable location. Note the validation failure. Close it." I asked her what non-serviceable was supposed to mean for a place that had a call come out of it. She said, "It means we don't dispatch to coordinates that don't resolve to a confirmed address. It's a safety policy. It protects responders and it protects response times. A call from a non-serviceable location is a validation failure, and a validation failure gets closed as a validation failure. I said, but a unit was dispatched. The card shows units dispatched and cleared. 42, by name. She looked at me then, finally, directly, and her face had something in it that wasn't impatience. It was closer to tiredness. The same tiredness, oddly, that I'd heard in the caller's voice. The look of someone who has been around a thing long enough to stop fighting it. She said, "Do not put narrative language in this review. Write address validation failure. Write non-serviceable location. Write no exception noted. Do not describe the audio. Do not transcribe the caller. Do not reference the unit. You write what closes the card, and nothing that opens a question." I asked her if she'd listened to the audio. She said, "I don't need to." And she left. I came back to that answer a lot, in the months after. I don't need to. Not I haven't. Not I will. I don't need to. She already knew what was on it, or she had decided long ago that knowing was the dangerous part, the part that pulls your name in. I should have closed it right then. Most of the time, that's the right professional move, and I'm a professional. You take the guidance, you use the approved words, you let the file go to sleep, and the file stays asleep. I've done it 100 times with things that bothered me more than they should have. But the credential thing wouldn't let me close it. Because if my ID was on work I never did, and then I signed the official close on top of it without ever understanding what I was closing, then I was certifying a false record twice over, with my own name, on purpose. And in this building, after 19 years, your name is genuinely the only thing that's yours. Everything else belongs to the county. The name is the one asset you carry out the door. So I kept pulling threads, carefully, after hours, in the spaces between real work, in the way that doesn't show up as time logged against a single incident. I started with the call taker, the position that answered the call. Every recording is tied to the seat that took it, and from the seat you can find who was logged in. I pulled the position login record for that night, that hour, that minute. The seat that took the call was logged to a name I knew. A dispatcher named Russ Coyle. Russ retired 4 years ago. There was a sheet cake in the break room with his name spelled wrong in blue icing. He moved 2 states away to be near his daughter and her kids. I'd stood next to him at that little retirement gathering and we joked about how the new CAD upgrade was going to be a nightmare to learn, and he'd laughed and said it wasn't his problem anymore, and clapped me on the shoulder, and that was the last time I saw him. His login had taken a 911 call on a Tuesday night last fall, on a seat in a building he'd left 4 years earlier. I told myself the same thing I always tell myself. Logins get reused. Old profiles get reassigned to a seat when a temp covers a shift and IT grabs whatever credential is closest. The name on the position is not always the body in the chair. There are a dozen dull administrative reasons a retired dispatcher's credential might surface on a card, and I listed all of them to myself, out loud, in the empty office. But that made 2 impossible attributions on one incident. Russ on the call. Me on the review. A retired man and an absent man, working an emergency together, from a place with no address, on a night neither of us was there. I went looking for the unit side next. The caller had named 42. If a unit was actually dispatched, there would be a response log, GPS traces, radio timestamps. Our units carry mobile data terminals that ping their location constantly, every few seconds, the whole shift. If 42 went anywhere near that field, the trace would show the car crossing the county, slowing, arriving, sitting, leaving. The trace is one of the cleanest records we have. I pulled the unit response log for the incident. It was empty. Not missing, which would have been its own kind of answer, the kind I could have written up as a data loss event. Empty. The card showed units dispatched and cleared, with times, but the linked response log, the part that should have shown a vehicle moving through space, had no entries at all. As if a unit had been assigned to a location, and cleared from it, without ever occupying a single point on the map in between. Sent and cleared from a place it never traveled to. I cross-checked against the radio traffic archive for that night, around that timestamp. The radio archive captures everything that goes over the air, continuously. If 42 was dispatched out loud, there would be a recording of the dispatcher's voice assigning it and the unit's acknowledgement coming back. For about 90 seconds bracketing the dispatch timestamp, the radio archive had a gap. The recording ran clean before, clean after, but across that stretch the system logged no audio captured. The reason field said maintenance window. A scheduled gap. A scheduled maintenance gap that fell, precisely, across the 90 seconds in which a unit that left no GPS trace was dispatched to a place with no road. I'm aware of how that sounds. I'm aware that maintenance windows are real, that radio archives genuinely do have scheduled gaps, that response logs sometimes fail to populate, that any one of these things, taken alone, is mundane. I built this whole account on mundane explanations. I want you to know that I tried to hold on to each of them as long as I could. But the mundane explanations were running out, one at a time, and every one I crossed off made the shape underneath them a little clearer, and the shape was not mundane at all. A few days later I went back to the audio archive to listen to the call again. I'd started doubting my own memory of it, and that's a real occupational hazard. You listen to so many calls that your mind begins to fill gaps with what it expects to hear. I wanted to confirm the unit number with my own ears. I wanted to be sure I hadn't invented the radio behind his voice. The file was restricted. Not deleted. Restricted. When I entered the incident number, the audio came back flagged for supervisor release, an access level above mine. The metadata was still visible, the length, the timestamp, the position. But the playback was locked behind a permission I didn't have. 3 days earlier I had listened to it freely. Now it was sealed. And the restriction, when I checked the date it was applied, had gone on the morning after I sent my escalation. I went down the hall to the one person in the building I trust with this kind of thing. A systems tech named Paul, who keeps the CAD and the audio archive breathing and who distrusts both of them more than I do, which is saying something. I asked him, carefully, who has the authority to restrict a call recording, and on what grounds. He said high-profile cases get restricted. Officer-involved incidents. Pending litigation. Anything a lawyer might eventually reach for. I asked who'd restricted this one. He pulled it up. He frowned at his screen the way a man frowns at a tool that just lied to him to his face. He said the restriction had been applied under an administrative service account, not a named user. A system account, not a person. And then he said, quieter, that the incident itself was flagged in a category he didn't usually see in the audio system, a category that belongs to the address validation team. He said it was tagged non-serviceable location, and that there was a closure note attached at the system level, above the incident card itself, the kind of note that governs how the whole record behaves no matter who opens it. I asked who wrote the closure note. He read me the user ID. It was Russ Coyle's. Russ, who took the call he could not have taken, had also written the system-level note that sealed it, on a date after he had moved 2 states away and stopped being our problem. Paul didn't say anything about ghosts. Paul is constitutionally incapable of saying anything about ghosts. He said, this is a data integrity problem, and you should stop poking it, because the way these things go, the integrity problem starts to attach to whoever's fingerprints are on it last. And he looked at me when he said last. He wasn't being cruel. He was warning me the way you warn a friend who's standing too close to an edge he can't see. I want to tell you about the night I found the second review, because that's the night this stopped being a curiosity I could choose to put down. I was reconciling my own QA history for the quarter, a routine task. We do it so our personal review counts match what the system credits us with, for performance tracking. I pulled every incident attributed to me for the period and started scrolling. The phantom one was there, of course. The field with no address. My initials on the close. But there was a second one now. Same incident number. Same location, the empty land, the vacated road, the hook in the historical layer. A separate, distinct QA review, attached under my initials and my ID. The date on it was not in the fall. It was in the future. A Tuesday, several weeks ahead of where the calendar actually sat. A date that had not happened yet. A review I had not done, could not have done, because the day did not yet exist outside of a calendar grid. And it was already in the system, already attached to the card, marked scheduled, with my name on it, waiting for me to walk up to it in time. I sat in that office under the bad lights for a long while. I'm not going to dress up what I felt, because dressing it up would be the wrong kind of honesty. It wasn't terror. Terror has a shape and an end. This was flatter and worse. It was the feeling of looking at a record of yourself doing something you have not chosen to do, on a day you have not lived, and understanding that the system has already filed it as settled. Not predicted. Settled. I did the practical thing the next morning, because the practical thing is the only thing I know how to do. I checked the staffing schedule for that future Tuesday. I was on it. Overnight. Quality review. So at least that part was ordinary. I would, in fact, be in this building that night, in front of that queue. The system hadn't put me anywhere I wasn't going to be. It had simply known, before I did, which incident I would open when I got there. I decided to go look at the place. In daylight. I told myself it was due diligence, that no review of a location dispute is truly complete without eyes on the ground, and that's even true, it's a thing we're encouraged to do for disputed addresses. But the real reason was simpler and I knew it. I needed the world to disagree with the record. I needed to go stand on that coordinate and have it be nothing, so that I could come back and write nothing with a clear conscience. I went on a Saturday, in my own car, not a county vehicle, because I did not want a unit log or a fleet GPS trace with my name on it anywhere near that field. It was a gray, cold afternoon, the light thin and flat and even, nothing dramatic about the sky at all. I drove out past the last subdivision, the newest one, the one whose addresses the validation table had finally caught up to. Past where the maintained road gives way to gravel, and then where the gravel gives way to a chained county access lane with a faded no trespassing sign zip-tied to the post. I parked at the chain. I walked the rest, following the line the historical layer had burned into my memory, the path of the road that used to go there. There was no road. There was the suggestion of one, the way old roads leave a scar in the land long after the surface is gone. A slightly lower line running through the grass. A seam where the brush grew thinner, where something compacted underneath still refused to let the trees take hold. It ran toward the low ground and then it simply stopped, right at the edge of the drainage easement, exactly where the map's hook said it ended. There was no structure. No foundation. No driveway. No mailbox, no fence posts, no concrete pad, no sign that anyone had ever lived or stood or waited there. Just wet grass and a gray sky and the sound of water moving somewhere down in the ditch that I couldn't see from where I stood. I walked out onto the coordinate. I'd dropped it into my phone before I left. I stood right on the pin, in the middle of empty county land, and it was the most ordinary, forgettable patch of ground I have ever stood on in my life. No road. No address. No emergency. No man. The physical world agreed with the GIS and disagreed with the call, and I felt something in my chest actually begin to loosen, because maybe, after everything, it really was just a corrupted record. A glitch that had learned to wear a man's voice. Then I looked down at my phone, to confirm I was standing on the right coordinate, and the map app had drawn a route line. I had not asked for a route. I had not entered a destination. But there it was, a thin blue navigation line, the kind the app draws when it's guiding you somewhere, running from the point where I stood, back along the scar of the vacated road, out to the maintained road, and on toward the county, toward us. A path leading away from this spot. As if something at this coordinate had requested directions out, and the phone, dumb and obedient, had quietly tried to provide them. I stood and watched it. After a few seconds it faded, the way a route fades when you cancel it or arrive, and the screen was just a map again. Blank land. A thin gray grid. A pin on nothing. I didn't run. I want to be honest about that, because the stories people tell always seem to have running in them, and mine doesn't. I didn't run. I walked back to my car at a normal pace, the deliberate pace you keep when running would mean admitting something to yourself that you aren't ready to admit. I drove home. I told my wife the drive had been for work and that I was tired, and both of those things were true, and I left it there. I went back to the office that week and I did exactly what Diane had told me to do. I wrote the review in the approved language. Address validation failure. Non-serviceable location. No response time exception noted. No narrative. And I closed the card. I closed it because I had finally understood the thing she understood, the thing Paul had been trying to tell me, the thing Russ may have understood before he ever walked out under that misspelled cake. There is no safe place in our system to put what this is. There is no field for it. There is no disposition code for a call from a place that doesn't exist, taken by a man who's gone, reviewed by a man who wasn't there. The only language the building owns is the language that makes a thing disappear, and a man who keeps insisting on different language doesn't fix the record. He becomes the irregularity in it. He becomes the thing the next review is about. So I used the words that close doors. I protected my name the only way the system allows me to, which is by agreeing with the system about my name. I stayed another year after that. I'm gone now. Retired, like Russ. And I can tell you exactly what's still in there, because I checked, more than once, in the weeks before I turned in my badge. The incident is still in the CAD. It has a valid number, sitting quietly between two ordinary calls on an ordinary night, a medical and a traffic complaint, both long since closed and forgotten. Its disposition still shows it handled, closed, resolved. Its location field still reads coordinates and pending validation, and the GIS still drops the pin on empty land, out past where the road used to go. The call taker on the position is still listed as a man who retired 4 years before that night. The system-level closure note is still signed with his ID. The unit response log is still empty. The radio archive still shows a scheduled maintenance gap across the exact 90 seconds when a unit that never moved was dispatched and cleared. The audio is still restricted. I never heard it again after that first night. All I have is my own memory of a tired man saying they missed the turn again, and the sound of our own dispatch radio breathing behind his voice. My first review is still attached, under my initials, dated to a Tuesday I spent at home with the porch light on. And the second review is still there too. The one that was dated ahead of me. Except it isn't ahead of me anymore. That Tuesday came while I was still working. I came in for the scheduled overnight, and the incident was sitting at the top of my queue, exactly where the record had always said it would be, waiting. I opened it. I looked at it for a long time. And I closed it again, with the same approved words I'd used before. So the system was right. I did review it on that date. It told me I would, months in advance, and then I did, exactly as written, down to the words. I have never been able to decide whether that means the record predicted me, or whether it simply made me. Whether I fulfilled a forecast or obeyed an instruction I mistook for my own choice. I've turned it over more than I should, and there is no field for that distinction either. Before I left for good, I checked the incident one last time. The way you check a lock you already know is locked, not because you doubt it, but because your hand needs to. There was a third review attached now. Under my initials. Under my ID. Dated to a Tuesday next spring. I won't be in that building next spring. My credentials were deactivated the day I retired. Paul handled it himself, confirmed the account was disabled, walked me to the door, shook my hand, and told me to enjoy not having to learn the next CAD upgrade. We both managed to laugh. But the review is scheduled. My name is on it. My deactivated ID is on it. And the location still has no address. Somewhere out past where the road used to go, on a patch of empty county land the map insists is nothing, the call is still in the system. Closed and handled and waiting. For a man it says is me. On a night that hasn't come, that I will not work, with a badge that no longer opens the door. No exception noted. Non-serviceable location. No further review required.